Hi, I'm Kristen Goodwin. On this episode of the Fox News Rundown, a new commander-in-chief promising a new chapter. But amid a deadly pandemic and a divided America, how will the Biden administration tackle toxic political polarization plaguing the country? Fox News special report anchor Bret Baier weighs in on what challenges lie ahead and what the incoming president must do to make good on his promises to heal the soul of the nation and address the needs of every American. And President Trump's relationship with news organizations and tech companies hasn't been all sunshine. Howie Kurtz, host of Media Buzz, the Media Buzz Meter podcast, and author of Media Madness, Donald Trump, the Press, and the War Over the Truth, shares his insight on social media platforms banning the president and how he thinks the Biden administration will handle the press. Plus commentary from Fox News contributor Pastor Robert Jeffress. The Fox News Rundown is a daily news podcast where we take a deeper look at the stories important to you. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast player by going to foxnewspodcast.com.
Hemmer.
I'm Janice Dean.
I'm Juan Williams, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Wednesday, January 20th, 2021. I'm Lisa Brady. The United States gets a new president today, but how quickly anything else changes is up in the air.
There will be pressure to do things bigger, to do things bolder. The challenge, though, is for his administration to kind of walk through the slim majorities that they have.
I'm Dave Anthony. The Trump to Biden transition may end an era of the president versus the press.
The press is going to miss Donald Trump. It's no secret that most of the media who are not fans of the president covered him in an overwhelmingly negative fashion. Sometimes he deserved it, sometimes he didn't. And there was a lot of visceral hostility there. But he was good for business.
And I'm Robert Jeffress. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Just 2 weeks after the deadly assault on the U.S. Capitol, a fundamental American tradition, the peaceful transfer of power in Washington, Inauguration Day, though the nation's capital is on lockdown with thousands of National Guard troops on duty for Joe Biden swearing in as the 46th U.S. president. The 45th recording a farewell video released late Tuesday afternoon.
We did what we came here to do, and so much more.
President Trump taking a somewhat subdued victory lap on the pre-pandemic economy, foreign policy, and as he puts it, restoring the principle that a nation exists to serve its citizens.
Our agenda was not about right or left. It wasn't about Republican or Democrat, but about the good of a nation. And that means the whole nation.
He also said political violence can never be tolerated, offering best wishes to the new president and prayers for keeping the nation safe and prosperous. Joe Biden spent the eve of his inauguration attending a memorial for the more than 400,000 lives lost to COVID in the U.S.
To heal, we must remember. It's hard sometimes to remember. But that's how we heal.
He says it's important to do that as a nation. Earlier in the day, Biden wiped away tears as he paid tribute to his late son, Beau, during a send-off event in his home state, Delaware, and also offered hope.
I know these are dark times, but there's always light.
He inherits a nation devastated by the pandemic and deeply divided.
We'll hear a lot about unity, I think, in Biden's speech.
Bret Baier is Fox's chief political anchor and the host of Special Report on Fox News Channel.
Really, the question becomes what the actions look like to get the 74 million voters who voted for President Trump at least on the same page when it comes to trying to get things done for the country.
Yeah, I mean, is there something that Joe Biden needs to say specifically when he addresses the country and really the world at this event?
The world is looking in and doesn't really understand what has happened. And I think there's a lot of Americans who look at it and don't fully understand. January 6th was a major moment, and the images and all that surrounded that moment really will be in the history books. So the challenge for Joe Biden is to get beyond that, and to say something that can possibly unite both his progressive side of his party and the people, again, 75 million or 74 million who voted for Donald Trump. It's a big challenge as far as the speech goes,
to say the least. There have been a lot of questions raised about the future of the Republican Party and the divide in the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party does have a lot of those same questions, at least on some level. And I wanted to ask you about the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. I mean, do you think that the focus on the pandemic will ease any of the early pressure that Biden might have faced from progressives, or is he looking at a short honeymoon either way?
Well, I do think that they're going to give him some leeway, but there will be pressure to do things bigger, to do things bolder. The challenge, though, is for his administration to kind of walk through the slim majorities that they have. 50-50 in the Senate, just a few seats for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. It's not going to be easy to get big, bold, transformational things through with this kind of configuration. And he has to articulate that to the left side of his party, and likely has to negotiate on all sides.
Certainly tackling COVID will be the first thing on his agenda as the new president. What else should he or could he try to address early on, or is it a mistake to even try to address anything else right away until things start to turn a corner in the pandemic?
Well, I think there'll be a lot that falls into the COVID basket legislatively. And, I think the Republicans will make a lot of noise about that, but you're already starting to see the proposals come out about a minimum wage increase that is, in the COVID relief, and other things as well, state and local support, different elements of his legislative proposal that'll all fall under, in the Biden's terminology, under the COVID name. I do think that there will be an effort for some kind of immigration legislation, but without a change in the filibuster, in other words, getting 60 votes for that legislation in the Senate, without blowing that up, I think it's tough to get those numbers with the current configuration.
I know West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, I believe he has said he would not be in favor of eliminating the filibuster rule, which again would mean a simple majority for more things or most things would be possible. So if he's against it, then there doesn't really seem to be the appetite for it. I mean, is he sort of the last line of defense for opponents of eliminating the filibuster rule?
I think so. I mean, I don't think we've got a full sense from people like Kyrsten Sinema or Mark Kelly, the newest senator from Arizona. All other senators seem to indicate on the Democratic side that they might be in favor of blowing up the filibuster. You know what that means is that all of that legislation would only need 51, and there could be big sweeping changes that include adding states like the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. That's all about power consolidation. So far, Manchin has said, and he said on Special Report recently, that he does not want to do that, has no interest in blowing up the filibuster. We'll see. There's a lot of pressure, and there will be a lot of pressure for legislative agenda items.
Presidents are prone to a last round of pardons and commutations on their way out the door. Regardless of the specifics of that this time, is that a mistake for President Trump, or does it not really matter in the big picture right now because of the second impeachment and the upcoming Senate trial of him?
Yeah, I mean, every president on his way out the door has some pardons and commutations. This list may be longer. We'll see. But we'll see who's on the list. I think that's the biggest question mark. You remember back in Bill Clinton's time, he pardoned Mark Rich, and there was all kinds of investigation about how that came to be. How these pardons and commutations come to be is part of it, and may be looked into by Congress, now controlled by Democrats, in all the investigative committees.
I read a column in recent days by Fox's Chad Pergram, who, as you know, has spent so many years working at the Capitol, and he was suggesting, just as it was people who breached the Capitol, ultimately it'll be people who can bridge the divides in this country. which is obviously much easier said than done. What would you say to offer people hope?
Well, I would say look to history and look to all the things that our country has been through. I mean, we're a resilient country. And yes, we are very divided currently, politically, no matter where you stand ideologically. The getting back to the Constitution and what founding fathers really wanted, I think is the ultimate goal for politicians when they start out. And Democrats now talking a lot about the Constitution in the impeachment trial. Republicans talking about a lot about the Constitution and following the rules. If you go back to those first principles, that's kind of our North Star. And I think resilience is a good message. We are a resilient country, and it might be a bumpy road, but we'll get there.
Any of us who are parents think about the state of the country and the future of it through the lens of what's coming for our children. For anyone who doesn't know, though, you've had much more pressing personal concerns for your son Paul since birth. 5 congenital heart defects, multiple surgeries at Children's National Hospital. And I know there's an event coming up to benefit that wonderful facility. I want to ask you first, though, how is Paul doing? How's he doing now?
He's doing well. Thanks for asking. He's 13. He just finished his 4th open heart surgery 7 weeks ago, and he is on the mend, recovering. He's chipping and putting, and soon will be back full swing in his love of golf. So he's doing great, and we're very blessed to have Children's National. They also do a lot of work with research on congenital heart defects that affects the world, and they're on the brink of a lot of breakthroughs. So we try to raise money every year, and we're doing this event. We usually do it in Naples, Florida, but since COVID this year, we're opening it up to the nation, and it's allstarpanelevent.com, allstarpanelevent.com, and it'll be a panel: Brian Kilmeade, Charles Payne, Shannon Bream, Emily Campagno, and myself, talking about the future of the country, taking questions from people who are logged on. We'll have special guests and performances by Rascal Flatts and all kinds of folks who you know well. And then the best part is that there's this auction that will have that you can get things like Zoom with Greg Gutfeld, or Jim Nantz will do your phone message on your cell phone. Hello, friends. Kind of stuff that's really unique that I think will raise a lot of money for the hospital. Every dollar goes to Children's National. So allstarpanelevent.com. It's February 13th.
That's amazing. And I've actually heard that some fundraisers are going, better than you might think in the virtual format, because it's kind of easier for people to log in and to donate and join that way than it would be to get there in person.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had 800 people or so in Naples, and it was an amazing event. This is the 4th year going, and we raise more and more money every year. But in the COVID world, we thought, why not open it up to everybody? And it'll be highly produced, and we'll have a great event. And then this auction will last for like 3 or 4 days, where you can bid on stuff, and we'll raise a lot of money, I think.
Well, let's hope for Children's National Hospital. Excellent. And I'm glad to hear that Paul's latest surgery has gone well and that he's recovering from it. And we always appreciate your time. Don't miss Special Report, folks, with Fox's Bret Baier. Thank you very, very much, Bret.
You bet.
This is Robert Jeffress with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
A lot can change with a new president taking over, including how he's covered in the press.
The media are among the most dishonest people anywhere at any time.
President Trump battled newspapers and networks over stories he didn't believe.
I want you all to know that we are fighting the fake news. It's fake.
And oftentimes in a tweet or a speech, he would call the press he didn't like
the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
But President Trump did talk to reporters a lot over the past 4 years in office.
And I don't mind being criticized, but not when they're wrong.
And sometimes things got testy.
Between you people, don't talk to me that way. You're just a lightweight. Don't talk to me that way. I'm the president of the United States. Don't ever talk to the president that way. All right, I'm going to go with another question. Go ahead.
Now Joe Biden takes over with likely a different approach.
It is the end of an era in many ways, the end of the era for the country after a highly contested election, and which continued for weeks and weeks and weeks with the charges of a stolen election.
Howie Kurtz is host of Media Buzz on the Fox News Channel and the Media Buzz Meter podcast.
Living here in Washington, it's kind of an amazing spectacle. You've got major portions of the city shut down, more than 20,000 National Guard troops, and that's the backdrop for the inauguration. For Joe Biden, it's kind of a reminder of the insurrection at the Capitol just a couple of weeks ago that led to Donald Trump's impeachment. And also, you won't have the usual adoring crowds, and that's a casualty of COVID-19. So it is the beginning of a new era, but I kind of feel like the Trump show is not yet completely played out.
Well, he's silenced on social media, and it was kind of weird. He ended his presidency so quiet because he so many tweets for so many years that we were so accustomed to. But now what? I mean, where does he go from here?
Well, he goes from here to a Senate impeachment trial by law after the House impeached him. All Democrats, 10 Republican votes, as you know. I had his former Deputy White House Press Secretary, Hogan Gidley, on my Media Buzz program the other day. And Hogan said, well, the press wants it both ways because they are happy that big tech, mainly Twitter, knocked the president's account offline and permanently bans him. And then they say, where's the president? Why haven't we heard from him? Well, the counter to that is, at least through yesterday, he was still the president of the United States. He could talk to reporters anytime he wants. He could grant television interviews. He could hold a news conference. He could just walk into the briefing room and everybody would take it live. I think he has chosen to remain quieter. He has released a couple of videos, but it is true. I mean, he loved that 280-character form of Twitter communication, and I have some problems with it as a free speech matter. I can understand a temporary suspension in light of the violence and potential for violence. I don't understand doing it to Donald Trump, private citizen. But when I say the Trump show is continuing, I mean, I think it's unfortunate for a new president who is coming into office, as Biden is, facing the height of an awful pandemic and a crippled economy, will in effect have a split-screen presidency for at least a while, as we see when this Senate trial starts and how long it takes to conclude.
The president often called the media and the press the enemy of the people, especially the New York Times or the Washington Post. He was combative with his made-for-TV-like news conferences. How different do you expect Joe Biden to be?
Yeah, Trump didn't like CNN, by the way. Let's not leave that one out. Or NBC. I think we're going to see a completely different era in several respects. First of all, the press is going to miss Donald Trump. It's no secret that most of the media were not fans of the president, covered him in an overwhelmingly negative fashion. Sometimes he deserved it, sometimes he didn't. And there was a lot of visceral hostility there. But he was good for business. He was a business model. Clicks, ratings up for all of the networks, all of the websites, all of the national newspapers and their digital subscriptions. So in that sense, the constant drama, some would say chaos, of the Trump years probably it's going to affect the bottom line for many media corporations. In another way, and every journalist, even the ones who just despised Donald Trump, had to acknowledge that he was by far the most accessible president of modern times. He would take questions 5 or 6 times a day, standing in front of the helicopter, on the plane, when he landed for the trip. And he obviously made a lot of news, plus the Twitter feed, which you mentioned earlier. I mean, every Sunday morning I'd have my staff email, Trump tweeted this, Trump tweeted that, we got to get into the show. All that's going to change under Biden for these reasons. First of all, Joe Biden ran not just on unity, but sort of lowering the temperature in the country. I don't think he wants to make as much news as Donald Trump did. We saw that during the campaign. He doesn't want to be in the public space every single hour, every single day. Secondly, he's not going to talk to reporters as much, maybe as much as George W. Bush did or Obama, Bill Clinton, which is the historical norm. And finally, we're going to see daily press briefings coming back after up and down and at times hiatus during the Trump administration. Jen Psaki, the incoming White House press secretary, is going to brief, or her deputies, just about every day. So it's going to be a sea change and a big adjustment for the mainstream media.
Do you think that she is going to face the same kind of questions that the press secretaries under President Trump in sometimes hostile news conferences would face?
I think there are times when there'll be rough back and forth between Jen Psaki and the press corps. She did this at State Department under President Obama. She also was the White House communications director. And, you know, when we get into when Joe Biden as president over a period of time owns the pandemic, owns the economy, all of the promises, obviously are not going to be kept all at once. There'll be some rough back and forth. Do I think it's going to resemble anything like the raucous and sometimes hostile and often negative relationship between reporters and, for example, Sean Spicer or Sarah Huckabee Sanders or Kayleigh McEnany? No, I don't. And there's a danger here for the media, which is, look, they're not the same. We're not talking about, we'll be talking about a new president who hasn't been impeached, who doesn't consciously stir the pot of controversy as frequently and as vociferously as Donald Trump does, but who nevertheless needs to be covered aggressively and held accountable. Especially, he made a lot of promises in the campaign, as every president does. If the press fails to do that, if the press briefings or the times that Biden opts to hold a news conference are softball affairs or love fests, then everybody is going to see, particularly the 75 million people who voted for President Trump, that there's a double standard in the media. I hope that doesn't happen, but I can't say I'm optimistic.
You mentioned the Trump supporters. You've probably seen some of the things that have been on other networks, CNN or MSNBC, where people talk about some of these Trump supporters need to be deprogrammed. I mean, there was a new Quinnipiac poll the other day that talked about 2/3 of Republicans still don't think that Joe Biden was elected legitimately. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman from New York, the Democrat, the progressive, she had this to say about the media, and maybe the media more on the conservative side. And what's your reaction after we hear from AOC?
We're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false.
So how would someone in Congress rein in the media?
Well, actually, there's a thing called the First Amendment that prevents you from reining in the media. There is no role for government when it comes to regulating media content. Now, lots of members of Congress of both parties have complained about misinformation and disinformation on social media because Facebook and Twitter, in my view, done such an awful job. They keep saying they're going to improve it, and that never quite happens in curtailing hate speech, violent speech, bullying, and things like that because they don't really view themselves as media companies when in fact they're very powerful media companies. I do have to say, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, in that same Instagram video, it was soon after the attack on the Capitol. She said she thought she was going to die. I don't know that she's thought this through. She just said some Democrats are talking about a commission or something. There's no legislation to react to, but I don't think that will get anywhere when it comes to regulating the media because of the tradition of freedom of the press in this country.
What do you think happens with social media? You have the whole controversy over Parler, the social media conservative side that was shut down with Amazon and Apple and Google. There are critics who are on the right that say, look, a lot of the stuff that was objected to on Parler is on Twitter and not taken down, so they don't understand.
Yeah, I don't think I'm troubled by the way that Apple, Amazon, Google got together to knock Parler offline, and it has become a conservative alternative for many on the right. On the other hand, I've seen a lot of really bad threats on Parler that were allowed to stay there, including threats against Amazon, which is one can understand. I mean, death threats against Jeff Bezos and why don't we blow up Amazon servers and that sort of thing. All the social media companies need to do a better job, but I hope Parler is able to come back just because I believe in, healthy discourse if we can keep some of the most dangerous garbage off of these websites.
The subtitle of your book, the Media Madness book about President Trump, was The War Over the Truth. That both sides claim to have the truth in this ongoing debate that we have. The word truth seems to have been obfuscated some. Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's why I use the subtitle. I mean, I think we have a world right now that is so polarized. And I will candidly tell you that I think the media, including all the cable news networks, have contributed to the polarization and deep divisions in American society, because that's how you get attention and you build audiences, by playing to that. It seems to me that, as the poll you cited earlier, right now, Joe Biden will begin his administration, although he, clearly won the Electoral College and he won by 7 million popular votes, with a significant chunk of the country not just wishing President Trump had won, but believing President Trump's repeated allegations, which remain unproven, which were not upheld in any court of law or by his own Justice Department, that the election was stolen. Well, the election was not stolen, but a lot of people believe that. That's going to be a difficult environment in which for Joe Biden to govern in. However, I think his lower key approach, it's harder to demonize Joe Biden. You may agree with his politics, you may not agree with his politics. He's been around forever. He's 36 years in the Senate, 8 years as vice president, 78 years old. I think if he's going to have a chance of success, and he'll be judged by those twin challenges of the pandemic and the economy, it will be if he can lower the temperature. And while I don't think people on Capitol Hill are going to suddenly be singing Kumbaya, the fact that he's going to go to church today with Mitch McConnell before being sworn in, I think is a nice bit of symbolism for how Biden would like to start his term.
Howie Kurtz, host of the Media Buzz on the Fox News Channel and the Media Buzz Meter podcast. Always good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, subscribe and listen to the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Former federal prosecutor and 4-term U.S. Congressman from South Carolina brings you a one-of-a-kind podcast. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. Rate and review the Fox News Rundown on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Robert Jeffress.
What's on your mind?
4 years ago, I was getting ready to preach a sermon. But no, it wasn't in my home pulpit at the First Baptist Church of Dallas. It was at the historic St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., with President-elect Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence just before their inauguration. On that day, I said clearly and unequivocally that God had raised up a builder to help meet our nation's challenges. That probably does not surprise you. But what might surprise you is, if I had been invited to preach a sermon today to President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, I would have been able to stand in that pulpit and preach the very same truths from God's unchanging word. Back in January of 2017, I said, "The challenges facing our nation are so great that it will take more than natural ability to meet them. We need God's supernatural power." The good news is that the same God who empowered Nehemiah nearly 2,500 years ago is available to every one of us today who is willing to humble himself and ask for God's help. This truth holds true yesterday, today, and forever. God can help us in the midst of our troubles. There is one thing we know for certain about politics. There will always be troubles. Everything we fix breaks back down. Every problem we solve crops back up. Every obstacle we cross leads to more. That's just life in a broken, sinful world. Politics has aptly been called the science of muddling through. We just do the best we can with what we've got. We faced many challenges that seemed insurmountable in January of 2017. And now 2017 seems like a lifetime ago. We are nearly a year into a global pandemic that rages on. We've experienced tremendous political and social unrest. Many people are hurting economically and have lost their jobs. No amount of human wisdom can solve these problems. We need to call on God. If President Biden and Vice President Harris humble themselves and ask for God's help, Scripture tells us He will answer. God is no respecter of persons, the Bible says. He doesn't see R or D next to your name when you pray to Him. He looks for a willing, contrite heart. God promises in Psalm 50, verse 15, "Call upon me in the day of trouble. I shall rescue you, and you will honor me." As I watch what is happening in our nation today, I'm not in a pessimistic mood. God has not been caught by surprise. God remains on His throne, and thankfully His reign is not in doubt or up for a vote. The good news that I preach every Sunday is, while we still have breath in our lungs, it's never too late for us to repent and turn and be reconciled to God through Jesus Christ. Things may be dark, but the same God who told light to shine out of the darkness can do so again in our nation, our cities, our neighborhoods, and our families, beginning with us. Our nation's brightest days may yet lie ahead, out beyond the horizon of today's squabbles and troubles. We don't get to choose what the challenges are, but we can choose how to meet them. We can go it alone, or we can call upon God. I am praying for America today, as I was 4 years ago, that we will choose to unite around a shared trust in the King of Kings. This is Robert Jeffress for Fox News.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand, from Fox News and Amazon Alexa.
Love Fox News? Click the subscribe button to get more of the news and opinion you trust. And click the Fox News Rundown playlist for the latest episodes.